Anyways, tuck in. I've got a skull to clean. The Crucifix, Blood of the Exorcist was directed by Stephen Roach, who also did the cinematography and was the editor, and was written and produced by Robert Howgate, and takes place in the Scottish Highlands, where Sarah and Fergus decide to get away for a Scottish Highland day. Yeah. Actually, they want to get away because they lost their son Luke due to tragic circumstances. They want to start anew, so they go to a plot of land where Fergus's dad lived. He did pass away, because obviously if he hadn't passed away, then he would have been a central character and they would have figured out what was going on a whole lot quicker, or maybe not. Am I having a little bit of fun with this? Yeah, I'm trying to. So the dad passed away, and as Fergus and Sarah try to both grieve and just, move on a little bit and explore a little bit of this land, they find more than they could have ever possibly bargained for. So, yeah, this is an indie film that has some nice picturesque stuff as far as the Scottish Highlands go, and has a simple story, actually a very simple story, with some mythology that I'm not necessarily going to get into because, in case you can't tell, I'm neither of Scottish nor Norse descent. There is a Viking involvement in this, not the Minnesota Vikings. I do want to give credit to the director for some very good cinematography, even though things are pretty simple, and I won't necessarily say the movie's great. There's at least passion behind the project. It's just so much familiarity breeds, not even contempt, just kind of, I do say Hanja Barge Benz, I probably got that totally wrong, as Sarah is fine. Alex Walton is fine as Fergus. I did like Julie Martis as Elsa. Wouldn't mind seeing her in more projects. And everything else about the movie is standard, but there is a nice message, at least, of maybe honoring the dead. In fact, there's even a line, don't let the living dismiss the dead. So there are nice elements in this. It ends up being mostly kind of just there and at times a little bit silly. But it is what it is, and the cast does what they can, so I wouldn't mind seeing what else the director, editor, cinematographer, and the writer-producer end up doing in the future. 3, 2, 1, spoiler. So there we go. I do think, though, the flashbacks with the kid were a little bit goofy. I will explain why here in a bit. So we do get a brief bit in the past where we see Thorvald Ironside, not of Michael Ironside fame, who is a Viking warrior that ends up getting killed by a priest. A priest that it turns out was a descendant of Father Stewart, that is played by Nicholas Ascombe. And we basically just see a little bit of build, and then Mr. Not Michael Ironside ends up saying, Odin owns us all. And then the priest says amen and stabs him in the skull with the cross, which, of course, nobody will be stupid enough to remove. Why would you think that? Why could you ever possibly think that? So present day, we have Sarah and Fergus picking up the pieces. Picking up the pieces. There's a guy named Mungo that is in this, because why wouldn't you have somebody named Mungo? And I don't know. I just think of Lake Mungo whenever I hear the name, even though I know they're totally different places. And yeah, Fergus is doing some metal detector fun. He ends up finding the skull because it's got the iron cross in it. And I did note first, Julie Martis, my word, would definitely like to see more projects she's in. Probably have to check out IMDb and see what else. She cared for Fergus's father, who it turns out actually has some ties to all this stuff that is happening with the iron cross skull. And Fergus digging up the skull, him and Sarah unfortunately still have some issues to work through. They both blame each other for the death of their son, when, in all honesty, there's both blame on both sides and blame on the kid for trying to play in the goddamn street. Just saying. Strange noises at night. The box with the skull opens. Anyway, tuck in, I got a skull to clean. I don't know why that line made me laugh so much. So, removing the crucifix from the skull basically leads us down a primrose path where Father Stewart ends up talking to Sarah because, devout Catholicism. There's Catholicism, Christianity, that kind of stuff, all that religious stuff that I'm not into. If you are, that's fine. And tell me more about this, ancient skull, which is just what you want to hear your priest say. And I did note, and I'm sorry to harp on this, or not even harp on this, but just point this out, but Julie has very pretty eyes. Good grief. Very blue. Very enchanting. So, we learn a little bit more about the history with words and names I'm not going to try to pronounce because, again, I'm not into Norse/Scottish mythology. But we get a little bit more info about all this. It basically is tipping his hand early that Elsa knows a lot more than she's leading on. So, what couple hasn't argued over getting rid of an ancient skull that they dug up at a plot of land in the Scottish Highlands? I know I have. And Sarah ends up punching him. Me next. Anyway, moving on from that. She ends up becoming full-on possessed. Full-on possessed very, very quickly. Because the spirit is being released. And by the way, this is not necessarily a demonic possession movie. It is more a spirit that was wrongfully terminated, even though we did get some weird Viking stuff early on, like at a Renaissance festival. Huzzah! But that's a Pod People reference for those that are not deep cut MST3K fans. But she's singing in different languages. And she even spat a doctor at one point. She's getting more and more possessed. The doctor ends up going away to say, okay, if she's not better in a little bit, I'll come back and get her, rush for an MRI. The doctor vanishes. And get me the fucking priest. He wants the fucking priest. And, of course, Father Stewart, being a descendant of the same guy that killed the Thorvald Mr. Michael Ironside, he wants to basically get revenge and also to pass on. The jump scares are not very good. The dark scenes are a little bit too dark. It's not for atmosphere. I think it's for a lack of lighting. And we get an exorcism scene straight out of The Conjuring 3 or 4. Again, there are points in this movie I think that work, and then there are a lot of points that just feel beat for beat like other films to where I kind of just got bored by it. But that doesn't end up working, the exorcism. She ends up killing the priest, hilariously. I mean, it's actually not Michael Ironside, but I digress. And it turns out that basically, yes, Elsa knew all about this, and then there's Mungo, and it all ties back to what the dad did. The dad actually had an obsession with Thorvald Michael Ironside, and now they're here to finish the job. Basically do a ritual to help his spirit pass on. This ends up happening with basically Fergus fighting Michael Ironside and killing him. You are a warrior, you will always be a warrior, and now you can go on, essentially. I skipped over quite a bit of stuff because the exorcism scene was rather hilarious. I mean, very, very hilarious. But we get a brief fight scene, and then him and Sarah are fine. They burn down the house. And that's pretty much it for the movie right there. There's more, mythology that was tucked into this movie, I'm sure that, not necessarily that I'm missing, but I'm not, as educated on, so I don't really want to comment on. But again, acting was fine for what it was. Too much familiarity for me to necessarily recommend, but I liked how it was shot, and I think there's potential here for the filmmakers, or the filmmaker and the crew in general to go on. And again, Julie Martis, wouldn't mind seeing her in more stuff. So, yeah, unfortunately, star and a half on Letterboxd, F grade overall, but there were parts of this I didn't mind. There are reviews just absolutely killing us on Letterboxd, and there are far, far more egregious things that have come out. At least they tried here. So there you go. Agree, disagree, what I said, like, share, subscribe, Twitter, Letterboxd, Blue Sky handles in the description. I'm John Rentlin, and until we revisit the Scottish Highlands again, I don't think I ever will see them. But that being said, happy trails to you.